So, if you're like most people, you're probably wrestling with, the tyranny of the massive goal.
Right, that big, hairy, audacious goal.
Exactly. You want to launch a new business or maybe write a novel, master a new skill, get in the best shape of your life. And because the goal is so big, the only solution we tend to look for is the quantum leap.
We do. We're sort of wired to look for that big break. We see these wildly successful people, and we just assume they found some secret lever, one big moment, one great investment that changed everything overnight.
And that expectation, that desperate search for the big overhaul is really the engine of inaction. Because when you look at that massive goal, it feels overwhelming and you just stall out.
You do.
Today's deep dive is a little counterintuitive. It's about ditching the quantum leap and discovering that the real secret to astronomical success actually lies in thinking microscopically small.
We're going to be dissecting this powerful framework. It's known as the aggregation of marginal gains. We're essentially taking the principle of compound interest out of your savings account and applying it directly to your daily behavior.
Right, and the sources we looked at make such a powerful case for this. Trying to change, say, 50% of your life by next month, it just results in information overload. And then, inevitably, you just give up.
Yeah, resignation. The breakthrough comes when you start to recognize and just chip away at the tiny frictions that are slowing you down every single day.
So what's the core idea?
The core premise is almost too simple to believe, but the math is just irrefutable. It's often called the 1% rule. The idea is if you find every single tiny component of a system and improve it by just 1%, the total outcome doesn't just add up. It multiplies. It compounds into something immense.
And to really understand that, to internalize it, you have to see it in action. And there is arguably no better story for this than the turnaround of the British cycling team.
Yeah, but before we get to the glory, we really have to talk about the shame. Before 2003, they were, frankly, they were an international punchline.
Seriously, an absolute joke. Their track record was abysmal.
Yeah.
In 110 years of history, no British cyclist had ever won the Tour de France.
Never.
Their reputation was so toxic that one of our sources notes that a major European bike manufacturer flat out refused to sell them equipment.
They were worried it would damage their brand.
Yeah, that having the British team use their bikes would actively hurt their own brand image.
I mean, that's pretty much rock bottom, right? But then everything changed in 2003 with the hiring of Sir Dave Brailsford as the new performance director. And Brailsford was not interested in telling riders to just train harder or find some radical new machine.
He didn't ask for a 100% improvement. He introduced a philosophy he called the aggregation of marginal gains, and he institutionalized it across the entire organization.
His whole mandate was pretty straightforward. Break the entire system of competitive cycling, the bike, the rider, the mechanics, logistics, sleep into 100 tiny processes, and then find a way to improve each one by just 1%. Not 10, just 1.
Okay, but this is where it gets really interesting, because the details they obsessed over they sound absolutely insane on paper. We are not just talking about making the bike 1% lighter.
Oh, not at all. I mean, sure, they optimized the obvious stuff like wind resistance, but then they dove into the mundane. They hired a consultant to teach them the best way to clean and maintain track surfaces, just to collect fewer dust particles that might slow the tires by a microsecond.
They redesigned the bike seats using biofeedback tech, just aiming for a 1% gain in rider comfort and power output. They tested different massage gels to see which one offered the fastest muscle recovery.
And this is my favorite example because it just shows the true scope of the system. They realized that if a rider got sick for 2 days, they lost 100% of their training gain for that period. So they hired an orthopedic surgeon.
A surgeon?
A surgeon, yeah, not a hygiene expert, a surgeon, specifically to teach the riders the optimal, most meticulous way to wash their hands to minimize the risk of catching a cold.
Okay, I have to stop you there. Hiring a surgeon for hand washing. Doesn't that risk, over-optimization? At some point, this obsession over every minuscule detail has to become a distraction, right? Doesn't it dilute their focus from the main goal of actually riding the bike faster?
That's a crucial question, and the material suggests the opposite. Because the goal was only 1%, it kept all the changes really manageable. It made the improvements feel like minor adjustments, not these Herculean tasks. The focus was always on cycling, but the entire support system around it was being optimized. For example, they realized sleep quality was a huge variable in hotels.
Right.
So when they traveled, they brought customized mattresses and pillows for every single athlete.
So every single night, no matter where they were in the world, The riders were experiencing the exact same 1% optimized sleep environment.
Precisely. They eliminated that tiny friction, that tiny disruption. And for a long time, people thought this was ridiculous. They were seen as eccentric, wasting vast resources on hand soap and fancy pillows. But they were betting on the math.
And that's the pivot. We've seen the story, but how exactly does the math take that leap from 1,000 tiny micro improvements to total global domination? What does that mean for you, the listener, who's just starting out?
It means understanding the difference between linear growth and exponential growth. When we hear 1% better, our brains default to linear addition. We think, okay, if I get 1% better today, and I do that for 365 days, I'll be 365% better. So roughly 3.5 times better.
Which sounds good, but it's not exactly world-changing.
Exactly. But compound interest doesn't work that way. When you improve 1% today, you apply tomorrow's 1% gain to an already 1% improved state. The formula is actually 1 raised to the power of 365.
And when you run those numbers,
The results are just astounding. If you get 1% better every single day for a year, you do not end up 365% better. You end up 37.78 times better.
wow,
You multiply your effectiveness by nearly 38. That is the true aha moment of the 1% rule.
37 times better. I mean,
Yeah.
that is astronomical, and it gives so much context to the success stories we see. They weren't born 37 times better. They just engaged in this minute continuous improvement.
And the inverse is just as powerful, but terrifying. If you allow yourself to get just 1% worse every day, you skip a tiny step, you slack off a little bit, you don't end up just slightly behind. You descend rapidly towards zero. You end up nearly 97% less effective than you were on day one.
So the difference between success and failure isn't some massive chasm on day one.
Yeah.
It's just this thin line between making that 1% improvement and, letting that 1% decline creep in.
And that gap, it looks completely meaningless when you compare day 1 and day 30. You put in the work for a month and maybe you feel slightly better, but the external world hasn't rewarded you yet. You haven't lost 50 pounds or closed the big deal or finished the novel. The process just feels so slow.
And this brings us right back to the British cycling team. The math kicked in, and the results became undeniable. It proved the power of that invisible compounding gap.
5 years. 5 years after implementing these micro improvements, they went to the Beijing Olympics and just dominated the sport, winning 60% of the available gold medals.
60%.
4 years after that, at the London Olympics, they set 9 Olympic records.
And that team, the one that had been a total punchline, went on to win the Tour de France 5 times in 6 years. Their success looked like a magical overnight transformation to the world, but internally, it was a system of thousands of tiny advantages just stacking up.
Now, let's address you, the listener, directly. You might be putting in the effort right now, making small changes, but you are not seeing those massive results yet. And that feeling of stagnation, the lack of external validation, that's real.
The source material validates that feeling completely. If you're doing the work but you're feeling frustrated, you are likely sitting deep in what they call the valley of disappointment.
That name is so crucial because it acknowledges the emotional difficulty. It is psychologically frustrating to invest, say, 2 months of effort and only feel 5% better when you expected to feel 50% better. It feels like the work isn't paying off, and that leads so many people to quit right before the compounding effect truly kicks in.
So the critical advice here is to trust the mathematical certainty of the compound effect. Stop looking for the massive revolution, and instead focus on identifying the dust, those tiny bits of friction that are holding you back.
This is where we talk about activation energy, psychologically speaking. We tend to avoid tasks that require high activation energy, a massive amount of willpower or physical effort just to get started. By focusing on 1% improvements, we lower that activation energy so much that the barrier to entry is almost non-existent. You will actually stick with the change.
That's the real insight. It's not about how effective the change is today. It's about how sustainable the change is for the next 365 days. If the change is too hard, you'll stop, and compounding stops immediately.
So let's apply this to 3 core areas of life right now, focusing on removing that tiny friction. Let's start with digital life and organization.
Oh, my digital life is a constant source of friction. I spend 10 minutes every morning just wading through junk, trying to find the one document I need, and it leads to immediate stress. The quantum leap solution is I will organize my entire file system this weekend, and I never, ever do it.
Right. So the 1% solution addresses the tiny friction first. This week, your only goal is to apply the 2-minute rule to your email. If an email takes less than 2 minutes to respond to, respond immediately. If it takes longer, schedule a dedicated block to handle it. You are not reorganizing your life, you are just changing one triage behavior.
And the 1% improvement there isn't just the time you save, it's the mental energy you save. The accumulation of those 2-minute decisions over a month clears out, 80% of the digital clutter that causes all that background stress?
Exactly. Now let's move to health and fitness. The quantum leap is joining a gym and deciding you'll go 5 times a week, instantly. That high activation energy leads to burnout by week 3.
Right. My goal is massive, and my starting point is 0. The friction is just overwhelming.
So the 1% gain is focused purely on consistency. Instead of trying to do a 45-minute workout, focus on making the act of starting easier. Lay out your workout clothes the night before, right next to your bed. That tiny act removes one decision point in the morning.
That's it.
Or commit to 5 push-ups right now. It sounds ridiculous, but the goal is to establish the identity. I am someone who never skips a workout, even if the workout is only 5 push-ups. That low activation energy guarantees adherence.
You're not trying to get stronger today. You're trying to prove to yourself that you are disciplined today. And that behavioral win, that's what compounds.
Now let's tackle career or professional skill development. If you want to master a new coding language, the massive goal is to spend 4 hours studying every single night. The friction is knowing where to start and maintaining that commitment after a long workday.
That sounds like a recipe for guilt and failure. What's the 1% focus here?
Find the minimum viable action. Can you commit to studying the new language for just 10 minutes while your coffee brews in the morning? Or maybe while you wait for a Zoom meeting to start? The source material emphasizes reducing the size of the required action until it is nearly impossible to skip. If you only commit to reading 3 pages of the textbook, you will probably read 5. If you commit to reading 50, you will likely read 0.
I love that. The small steps work because they use momentum rather than willpower. You're leveraging the fact that starting is always the hardest part. Once you're 1% into a task, the momentum often carries you further than that initial 1%.
So your challenge for this week, and this is derived directly from the principles in our sources, is to identify 3 areas in your life and commit to a single marginal gain in each. Do not look for a 50% improvement. Look for the tiniest, most boring, most sustainable 1%.
Start small. Start simple. It might mean organizing the top drawer of your desk so that tool you always need is right there. It could mean setting a mandatory 5-minute wind-down routine before you go to sleep. No screens, just breathing.
Or maybe look for those tiny environmental frictions. Is there a squeaky chair that always breaks your concentration? Fix it. Unsubscribe from the 3 junk emails that force you to waste time clicking delete every single day. Those tiny removals are also compounding gains.
So we circle back to the core truth here. Success is not a singular dramatic event. It's not a home run. It is the result of a deliberate system of habits. It is the accumulation of these tiny, boring, 1% advantages that stack up invisibly for a long time until they make the difference between 1 times and 37 times.
We've spent this deep dive establishing the immense power of consistent micro-improvements. We learned that the secret is doing the small, easy things that guarantee adherence so that the math can kick in.
But this naturally raises a really important tactical question. If you only have the bandwidth to commit to, say, 3 new 1% gains this week, how do you know which areas to choose? How do you prioritize the changes that are going to deliver the most leverage?
That's where the art of focusing comes in. We have to explore the disciplined pursuit of less, essentialism and the critical path. That's a system for ensuring the 1% changes you choose are the ones that actually matter, and that's a system worth diving deep into next time.